My collection is titled The Year Between, and it is inspired by the concept of gap years and travelling as a young adult. I am designing a women's wear collection, so my consumer is female, between the ages of 18 to 25. She's recently graduated university and is trained to be a journalist. Some of her hobbies include hiking, exploring, photography and reading. She likes to shop at brands such as Anthropologie and Free People, but struggles to find her style clothing for more affordable prices. At the start of my research, I initially looked at the McKinsey report State of Fashion 2025, which discussed in it the increase in travel and tourism. I then decided to take this forward as my macro trend for my concept and researched more into young people travelling and the stats of young people that take gap years, which is what initially inspired the concept of my collection. As I began my trend research, I came across the upcoming artful draping trend that was found throughout the Spring-Summer 2025 runways, and then I later on participated in a draping workshop, which I learned more about the skills of draping, and all of this together influenced me to decide to bring draping through my collection. The next trend I researched was the return of boho, which was the main inspiration for my collection. So the trend celebrates paisley prints, floaty silhouettes and a very muted colour palette, but as it's a returning trend, I wanted to redesign it and put my own spin on it in terms of silhouette, colour palette and styling. Next, I looked at the key trending pieces for Spring-Summer 2025, including asymmetric skirts, layering and mini skirts, and in particular the ruffled dresses. I created my colour palette from looking at Spring-Summer 2025 runway shows and boho style garments. My colour trend research also predicted earthy and muted neutral tones. Next, I conducted some research on the Next brand and their position in the market compared to their competitors. Next brand profile also said that only 13% of UK shoppers have come across Next on the media. Therefore, I think increasing the use of social media could expand the customer base, especially since this collection is targeted at a younger audience. Then I looked at Next sustainability values, one of which being to reduce waste, which I then researched and experimented with zero waste pattern cutting, which I'm planning on bringing into my collection, as well as offering services for customers' products they no longer use. I then went on to research this and found that H&M had already been offering a recycling service in exchange for a voucher, and Zara's offers a buying and reselling platform for Zara products only, both of which I think would be quite interesting avenues for Next brands to explore. Next, I looked into sustainable dyeing processes, which I came across a new waterless low-energy dyeing technology that was designed by the brand Alchemy to reduce environmental impact and water consumption in the textiles industry. I also researched about using different natural fibres to dye fabric, as this is a more sustainable approach and reduces water, as the water doesn't become contaminated by the chemicals of other man-made dyes. Natural dyes also are quite fitted for my collection, as I compared them to my colour palette and a lot of the tones match quite well. I also did research into upcoming trending prints, which I was quite keen to include in my collection, and I thought about using the natural dyeing to create the prints in itself during the dyeing process. I looked into sustainable fabrics as well and what would be the most suitable for the climate and the draping and dyeing that is going into my collection, including organic cotton, bamboo, wool, tencel, linen and aloe shear. Before going into the design development, I wanted to create a mood board just to gather my ideas on silhouette and design features, as well as some fabrics and print patterns that I thought about using. Then going on to my initial design development, I started by looking at my concept imagery and then went on to use this to experiment with designing different styles of draping and different looks from that. Next, I looked at designing using godettes and changing the silhouette of skirts to create the boho floaty aesthetic. I also looked at bringing in layering that is suitable for the spring, summer and warm climate. For my final design, I wanted to take inspiration from the ruffle dress trend, however I wanted to make it zero waste. So I started by doing some designs of dresses that incorporated ruffles in the boho aesthetic, and then I went on to draping on a half-size mannequin. I was happy with the outcome, however I wanted more dramatic ruffles, so I created a sample with double the width and preferred it, so had to change my pattern. This is my women's wear spring-summer 2025 collection for Next. Look 1 consists of a layered midi skirt and a draped halter top. Look 2 is oversized linen shorts with a light knit jumper and a ruffle top underneath. Look 3 is the ruffle dress with godettes that I decided to make. Look 4 features a layered draped top with godettes and a linen ruffle trouser. Look 5 consists of an asymmetric ruffled skirt and top with linen overshirt. Look 6 is a sheer draped top and draped skirt. After making my final toile, I then finalised my zero waste lay plan just to ensure that it was 100% zero waste. I then started by sewing the godettes to each skirt panel and then went on to create the ruffles. For the ruffles, I used a rotary cutter to ensure all the edges were as straight as possible and weren't jagged at all, as I decided that I didn't want to hem them as I think it would create too much bulk with the ruffles. I then went on to sewing a straight line down the edge of the ruffle fabric pattern piece. To gather the fabric together, I pulled the thread through and then I laid it next to the skirt panel pattern piece to ensure that it was the same length, pinned it together and then sewed them all together to each skirt panel. Next, I went on to attach all 6 of the separate skirt panels all together to create the whole skirt. As you can see here, the skirt panels and then the ruffle is embedded in between the godette and the skirt panels. And then I use the overlock machine to overlock all the edges and the top so it's ready to be sewn onto the chest. Next, I moved on to the bodice section of the dress, so I started by ironing the fusing onto the neck facing, and then I pinned those together and sewed it together and overlocked the edges, and then I added a stay stitch to ensure that the neck facing stayed inside the neckline and didn't come out, as well as adding a tack down it, a very small tack in a few locations to ensure that it stayed inside, as the fabric is quite flimsy so it moves around quite a bit. And then I went on to using the cover lock stitch machine. I started by pinning down the hem down by my armhole, so I was about to use the cover lock stitch machine, and then I used it around the sleeves and across the back as like a fashion feature with the double stitch line. And then I sewed the darts on and connected the back panel so that I could sew it all together, and I used the overlock machine down all the seams on the inside. Here is my final garment on the mannequin, and here is the dress modelled on a body. And here is close-ups of the bodice and the front, the draped back and the back of the dress, and the ruffles in motion.